because we're talking about internal intelligence, we're talking about intelligence services, and if we know what they're doing, when they're doing it, they must be doing something wrong. You know, the moment they accept and they assume involvement in something like this, there's no way back. This is an admission of direct involvement.
It's a major blow to Russia, with the head of Radiation, Chemical and Biological Protection Forces, Lieutenant General Igor Kirillov, having been killed. To discuss the ramifications of what this really means and could this lead to further escalation between Russia and Ukraine, I'm being joined by a senior journalist from Moscow, Tatiana Kukhareva. Tatiana, thank you so much for joining us over here on India Today Global. Let's begin with the impact. What does this really mean for Russia in terms of a loss?
Well, look, it's obviously a great loss, because he was the general was doing a very important job. But you know, that's the thing with taking out head of the division remains. So I dare say that the work that he did will continue. It does work wonders in terms of you know, it's a big incident, if I can call it that. So it is, you know, it's a big story. It makes for a big story. It makes for a splashy story. And of course, you know, however remarkable the person that was taken out was, the work will still continue. You know, this is very important to understand that he was ahead of a division. The division will still continue its work and still will put a lot of effort into, you know, making light of the crimes that are being committed in that conflict.
Right. But also, this is not the first time that we're looking at a targeted killing within Russia. If you could talk a little bit about the security breach, the fact that a suspect has been arrested, an Uzbek citizen, and he's confessed to having Ukraine intelligence services have him carry out the attack. But this is a huge security breach. What's being done in Moscow? What are the kind of questions and investigations and introspection on the security breach?
Well, I think, you know, the biggest indication of the security forces, when you know what security forces are doing, they're not doing their job correctly. I actually believe it to be true, you know, because we're talking about internal intelligence, we're talking about intelligence services, and if we know what they're doing, when they're doing it, they must be doing something wrong. You know, but obviously the investigation is ongoing. It is going to be a thorough investigation, and it is already a thorough investigation. But I do believe that.
But would you not consider it an intelligence failure?
Look, taking into account the fact that the general was living in a very, you know, it's just an apartment building complex. There is no extensive security in that complex. You know, he wasn't living at I don't know, guarded mansion outside of the city, you know, with security posted here and there. So in relative terms, I think that a person who's living a simple life, and it was a simple life, you know, in terms of all the perks that he could have had, potentially, it is, you know, is always possible to get to that person.
Okay.
And
in terms of escalation, Tatiana, how do you see escalation? How do you see, and what do you think Russia's response is really going to be like now?
You know, in terms of the, it's not even about the escalation, it's about the gesture itself. You know, I find it that within this conflict specifically, whenever we've seen some drastic measures on the part of the Kiev, government, it's always an indication of the fact that we are making gains. You remember when they took they made that attack on the Kursk region. It was exactly at the moment where Russian forces were making significant gains in the Lugansk and Donetsk region. So it usually is a very good indication of the fact that we are right now making very big gains, and they need to distract attention, and they need to score a win, so to speak, to kind of parade it around and to again distract attention from the fact that this conflict is not what it was 2 years ago, not even 1 year ago.
Right. But what is also very interesting, Tatiana, is that the US has now come out and vehemently denied any involvement in this attack because this is in the heart of Moscow. And this could have massive ramifications for Washington, D.C. So they're really distancing themselves from this killing.
Well, look, it's the same thing that they've done with, you remember when there were rumors that they had given green light to the use of ATACMS missiles. And then there were rumors circulating all around. There were rumors in the media, there were rumors, in the European media. But the White House took like a step back and they were like, okay, because, the moment they accept and they assume involvement in something like this, it actually, there's no way back. This is an admission of direct involvement in this conflict, something that we've been talking about for a long time now, from the Russian side, because it is obvious that, to operate high precision American military equipment, to make some of the strikes that Ukraine has been, the rare things that they have been able to do, they would need assistance. But admitting to being part of that would put the US in direct conflict. They would actually physically
Exactly.
become a part of this war. And
Right.
I don't believe they want to do that.
They might
They're
not want
making
they might not want to do that, but the larger picture over here is also, is this an act of desperation by the United States of America, given that there is going to be a change of guard come 20th January?
I believe the Biden administration is acting extremely desperately right now because the amount, the sheer volume at which they've stepped up efforts to participate in this conflict is astonishing. It's like they're trying to do everything in their power whilst they still have it, and the time is running out. Unfortunately, it makes for unnecessary losses on both sides of this conflict.
Right, going back to Lieutenant General Kirillov's killing, now Ukraine, while has accepted its role, has also said that he was involved in the killing of over 2,000 Ukrainian soldiers because of the chemical weapons that he's used. What do you have to say about or for the allegations that have been made against the Lieutenant General?
Well, look, first of all, they have to justify anything that they do, they have to justify. And we need to remember that every government on the face of this planet, when they're talking, the majority of what they're saying is directed at their population. So whenever people in Kiev start talking, it basically, first of all, targets Ukrainian population. And they need to keep the remains of the morale, on the ground. So they need to continue vilifying Russia. They need to continue creating this big monster out of Moscow, because otherwise, there are questions that are going to be erupting. The people have been living in this for 2 years, over 2 years. It's going to be, 3 years soon. And of course they jump to claiming that responsibility, and of course they would accuse the person they had taken out of everything that they possibly can to kind of show that they can still do some things. Because on the ground, if we look at reports that are coming in on a daily basis, Russian forces are making gains. You have to counter that in terms of the internal propaganda. It's the one thing that they've done rather successfully from the beginning of this conflict is internal and external propaganda.
Right. Tatiana, so, before I let you go, in terms of the response, this is a major provocation, but we've not really seen a massive response from Moscow. Is it because they're biding their time, being cautious because they know that come January, a lot of things would change and they'd like to recalibrate?
I love the word that you used, provocation, and it's exactly what it is. And if I've seen and if I know something for a fact, and if you've been paying attention, then our president is not one to respond to be driven by provocations. He's way too experienced to kind of allow himself to be dragged into something against his will, and that's what a provocation strives to achieve. So in terms of response, as any time when there is a provocation by the Ukraine in this conflict, there will be a response. The response will be measured, because the one thing that has been the main priority for Russia in this conflict, and that President Putin has stressed from day one, is that we're not looking for unnecessary loss of life on the Ukrainian side. We're not attacking civilians, we're not targeting civilian population. And, a response to a provocation usually involves exactly that, unnecessary loss of civilian lives. So if we're talking about this, I doubt this would ever happen, because that's just not the way Russia conducts itself in this conflict.
If I could just also ask you before I let you go, Tatiana, on the Russia North Korea story, because that's something that President Zelensky has been using a lot against Russia. What are the facts on the ground? What really happened?
Well, the problem with answering this question is that I'm not on the ground. Um, I am in Moscow. I have yet to have seen an actual North Korean in Moscow. Unfortunately, I haven't been that fortunate. We've had all manners of tourists this summer. A lot of people from India, a lot of people from from anywhere in Asia, but not yet a single North Korean. But just coming back to my previous statement, this is a really good story, isn't it? A story that is very simple. The one thing that I've learned within my professional span in working in English language media is that the more simple the narrative, the better it sells in the West. And it's a very simple narrative. You have one villain, you have another villain, and they work together to kind of, wreak havoc on a very innocent, poor state. It's a very simple, very well-constructed story that is bound to be successful. The problem and the beauty of that story is that, whatever comes out of it, President Zelensky, if I remember correctly, in the beginning of this conflict, he claimed that Russia is losing 50,000 soldiers on a daily basis. And that was back in 2022. So by that logic, and I was coming on shows and asking, where's the proof? The proof. Show us physical evidence of what you're talking about. That's the beauty of these stories. If there's no proof, no one can say they're false and no one can say they're true.
He's putting out videos, but it's not verified. So we're not claiming that they're correct, but just saying that he is putting out videos. He is trying to build that
He's been putting up
conversation.
stories like this throughout these whole 2.5 years. And he's been very successful at structuring narratives that really sell and that contribute to vilifying Russia on the
Right.
international scale.
Right, Tatiana Kukhareva, thank you so much for joining us over here and breaking down what it really means to have a prominent figure having been killed in Russia, and yet why is it that Russia is so cautious and careful in its response, and what's the policy of the Putin administration? Thank you so much for joining us.